Arsenal 4, Tottenham Hotspur 1. Let's start with a positive here because Eberechi Eze was nothing short of spectacular, brilliant, unplayable at times, and Arsenal thoroughly deserve this victory, Crook.
Yeah, they did. And actually, I spoke to Mikel Arteta after the game. He was in tip-top form, as you'd imagine. Great weekend for Arsenal. They see their rivals slip up. They go 6 points clear at the top, and the player who snubs Spurs for Arsenal becomes only the fourth player in history to get a hat-trick in this particular fixture, which is an incredible statistic. And he gave me a really revealing answer right at the end of the interview when I said, did you know he was going to be this good? And he said, you know what? I spoke to Thomas Tuchel, and he said this player is special. So that tells me that Eberechi Eze is pretty much guaranteed a place on the plane for the World Cup next summer.
There you go. Contacts in high places. Mikel Arteta liaising with the England manager over Arsenal signings. That could be a back-page story, that, Crook. Scott Minto, titles aren't won in November, but after that performance and this weekend, some people might beg to differ.
Yeah, and it's definitely Arsenal's to lose now, especially with City losing. We knew that would be a difficult game. We spoke with each other, didn't we, on Friday, and said it could be a pivotal weekend, but it's not a defining weekend. I mean, Pep said it before the weekend, and he's absolutely right. We're still not mathematically a third of the way through the season. But Arsenal, with how strong they are, with how vulnerable the others look, it's starting to look like that Chelsea might even be the nearest rivals. And you know what I think about them? They're not ready. So I still feel City are the only team that could possibly take the title off Arsenal. And they are capable, I believe, of going on like a 10-match winning run. But the way they're playing at the moment, so are Arsenal. And actually, if you ask me which team would more likely to do that, it would be Arsenal more so than City. So everything's looking rosy for sure for Arteta.
I mean, look, we obviously have knee-jerk reactions whenever there is a big result. And I think whenever someone establishes a lead, earlier in the season, everybody had already given the title to Liverpool and there was no chance for anybody else on the back of basically one free kick, let's be completely clear. But now, I think this was a defining weekend. I think it was a defining weekend because of Manchester City dropping points, Liverpool getting beaten at home and basically showing that they're not going to be able to challenge for the title, so almost knocking themselves out of the race. Manchester City is supposed to be the closest challengers and them dropping points at a difficult place to go in Newcastle, but Arsenal have already gone there and picked up 3. And Chelsea not quite being the team that are ready to challenge. So I think it was a defining weekend. But what I think would be more defining is the rest of the week. Arsenal have got Bayern Munich, who won 6-2 at the weekend. Elise, Kane, Jackson, all on the score sheet as they beat Freiburg by 6-2. And Chelsea next Sunday afternoon, Crook.
It's massive. And, to get off to a flying start as they did ahead of such a huge week, I think will only help them grow in confidence. Obviously, we're going to get into it at the end of the week when we do the preview podcast, but I fancy Arsenal to go and win at Chelsea. I just think they're in that kind of form at the moment, even without their captain, without their best central defender, without a recognised striker. They're capable of absolutely blowing teams away. And I tell you what, the atmosphere at the Emirates was absolutely crackling yesterday afternoon. The Angels song beforehand, the big tifo with Sol Campbell at front and centre, obviously a clear message to the Tottenham fans about his defection. I just wonder how they're going to replicate that when Bayern Munich come to town in what is another absolutely massive game. If they beat them, wow, that is going to be some statement to the rest of Europe.
I think this, a Tottenham angle to this as well. We'll get to that in just a second. But I do think it's really important to highlight just how controlled Arsenal were yesterday. There was a lot of chaos in the game against Sunderland 2 weeks prior to that. There was none of that. There was no hint of a fight from Tottenham Hotspur. From the minute the game started, the Kevin Danso reaction to the effort that sort of came off the goalkeeper and had to put it wide, the Rice volley. As soon as that happened, Arsenal were on the front foot. They didn't really, it wasn't like they peppered Vicario's goal. Let's not pretend that they were smashing shots in left, right and centre. They were just in control of the game and they looked like they could score when they decided that they wanted to do that. Whereas Tottenham Hotspur just were completely insipid. And the setup obviously is drawing a lot of criticism. 5 at the back, only the second time this season they've done that. They did that against PSG. They actually took a 2-goal lead in that game and then lost on penalties, Scott. But they were very poor. They were a little bit, they're within themselves a little bit, I think. And I think that there was a lack of intensity and aggression that you would expect from any team that goes into a North London derby. More importantly, if you are going to set up the way they did, you've got to have fight and desire to defend for your lives, and they did not.
Yeah, I'd like to at some point touch on Ebreze, because I do think he's a sensational player, and I saw his talent at QPR, and I was saying that he's going to be a star of the future. But in terms of Spurs, yeah, I mean, look, you can play 5 at the back, but you also have to have the ball. And when you have the ball, you have to pass the ball. And when you pass the ball, you have to make 3 or 4 passes. Now, again, I want to sort of compliment Arsenal here, because they suffocate you without the ball. You know, you look at the teams and the way that they try to play against Arsenal. If you try and play through them, it's almost impossible to do it. They are one of the very best teams in Europe without the ball. And then what do they do with the ball? But I think for Spurs to turn up and play in the way they did, it's one thing. Anybody can lose at the Emirates, and anyone could possibly, concede 4 goals. But to concede in the way they did, to play the way they did, to have the performance in the way they did, 2 central midfielders who are perhaps not great on the ball, Xavi Simon's on the bench. I like Thomas Frank, I do. And I think, again, to the compliment of Arsenal, showing that they're almost scared going there and how strong Arsenal are. But once you're there, my goodness me, you have to try and create something. And 2 shots on target, the first one being the goal, which was, what was it, a 2% chance on the XG. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me. If I'm a Tottenham fan now, I'm feeling bruised enough for the result, but actually the performance was even scarier.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't threat the David Raya goal at all. I mean, the one goal that they did scored was an absolute worldie from 45 yards, which would never go in, 98 times out of 100, as you've already pointed out. But they are responsible for the 2 lowest XG totals in the Premier League this season. The one they managed against Chelsea at home, 0.1, and the one they managed yesterday, which was 0.07. That just shows you that they had absolutely no teeth whatsoever. And it's a real lack of fight from Spurs. And Thomas Frank did apologise to fans post-match, Crook, and you spoke to him. And I wonder what his sort of demeanour was like, because I think you have 2 rules when you walk into a job like Tottenham. The first thing is that if you listen, they've had a lot of managers. They've had 7 managers in the time that Mikel Arteta has been in charge of Arsenal in the last 6 years. You have to win your home games and win fans over. You have to show them that you are able to put together a team that is going to be competitive, and you have to do it at home where everyone can see you. And you have to make sure that you go into your first North London derby with a chance, with an opportunity to bloody the nose of your rivals who you know are better than you. And he has done neither.
No, and I had a bit of a meltdown on air, didn't I, in the build-up to the second goal. And obviously, I'm not a Tottenham fan by any stretch of the imagination. I've got no axe to grind with Spurs, despite the narrative that some of their supporters have built up. But I was so frustrated on their behalf, because to go with the back 5 for only the second time this season, I didn't get it, because they're not good enough. Kevin Danso and Christian Romero are not good enough defenders to keep this Arsenal team out. And you don't need a back 5 when Arsenal don't have a recognised striker running in behind you. The fact they have 3 centre-backs and Marino and Eze just took it in turns to play in that false number 9 and pick them off at will is a real flaw in Thomas Frank's system. And he held his hands up. He said, I take responsibility. I was confident going into the game. I expected us to be a lot more competitive than we were. And I think maybe they were a bit unfortunate with the timing of the second goal, because I think once the first goal went in, he was already making his mind up to make changes to that system at half-time. The second goal really takes the game away from them. But I thought it was a pathetic performance from Tottenham. I thought it was lifeless. I thought the players looked like they didn't believe in the manager, didn't believe in the system. I know they've got issues. They haven't got a striker worthy of the name. But that is as poor a display in a derby match as I can remember. And I know they've got a wretched record at the Emirates, haven't won there in 15 years. Somebody told me it's one win in 33 games away from home against Arsenal. but he never gave them a chance, Thomas Frank. And from being in a position a few weeks ago where they could have been second in the table, if Manchester United beat Everton on Monday night, they go 10th, Tottenham. And it feels like it's been a really underwhelming start to the season. And those negative tactics will only add fuel to Thomas Frank's critics amongst the Spurs faithful.
Yeah, I think that the first point is that actually, the early tables can often skew your judgment. And I think that they did have some good results away from home, which really helped them. But the performances against Chelsea, the performance against Manchester United, the performance against Arsenal, and really, if you're a Tottenham fan, even though you finished 17th last year and you won the Europa League, you're measuring yourselves against those sort of opponents, not measuring yourself against Burnley. You're not measuring yourself against Bournemouth, even though that was a bit of a trudge for them as well. You're measuring yourself against what you think are the established elite, because that's where you want to be. And they are not performing in those matches. They probably should have lost when I went to the Arctic Circle with them. In fact, they definitely should have lost when I went to the Arctic Circle with them, and they dragged themselves back into that game somehow. So I do think that he has got a little bit of an issue, and I do think he's a good manager. I do think he's got great ideas, and he's got the ability to cultivate different styles of football, because we've seen that at Brentford, and Scott's highlighted that on this podcast a couple of times. But I'm not sure that they're buying into him. I'm not sure that they're buying into what he's saying. I don't know if he's selling it in the right way, or they're not having the sort of clear change from Postecoglou to Frank. But something's not right there, and it needs to get sorted pretty quickly, because otherwise they're going to find themselves in a situation where there is angst and disgruntlement again at Tottenham, and I think they could very much do without that.
Just on that, let's not forget where they were last season. They won a very poor Europa League and they finished bottom of the rest. So that's something that Thomas Frank is having to sort out.
Do you think the fans are satisfied then, Scott, with what they've seen so far?
I think the fans are totally unsatisfied. But you've got to understand where he's coming from. He's coming from almost rock bottom, despite them winning the Europa League and the first trophy in almost 2 decades. He's got Solanke out. He's got Kulusevski out. He's got Maddison out. He hasn't got that kind of firepower that a lot of other teams have got that can turn something like an Eberezer. I mean, they were in for him. They looked like they were about to get him. And then what happens? Arsenal swoop in and get him and get the hat-trick. So
you've read that story before, though, haven't you? That's the Tottenham Hotspur annual.
Well, absolutely. And that's something which Thomas Frank has to turn around. So, look, should the Spurs fans be happy? No, of course not. But this is a long process. There's going to take time. It's going to take a long time. I just used the word process. I mean, how many times has Mikel Arteta used the word process over the last 6 years? So it's going to take time. They need the best players back. Daniel Levy's not around. They need a couple of windows, and then you can start to judge Thomas Frank, in my opinion.
I agree with you, but I go back to Mikel Arteta, and if we're going to use him as the yardstick here, because he's the only manager that in recent memory that has been able to trust the process and to employ a process, and given the time and the keys to be able to do that, by the way, maybe Ruben Amorim will be the next one that gets that opportunity, and hopefully it works out for him as well. But what Arteta did at the beginning of his reign was he went out, made them win matches, and got them an FA Cup within 8 months of being in charge. He made sure that he had something tangible and positive to cling on to. I'm not saying that Thomas Frank's got to win something. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that what you need to do as a new manager at a big club is win the PR war. You've got to win the fans over. If you're losing home games and getting beaten up by Chelsea and Arsenal as the Tottenham manager, you are putting yourself under unnecessary pressure.
Yeah, look, in terms of those two teams you mentioned and the performance they put in yesterday, I couldn't agree more. But you just mentioned about Mikel Arteta. Despite him winning the FA Cup, somewhere in between the following years, Arsenal fans wanted him out. And if it wasn't for him and the hierarchy trusting the process, then he would have been out. So that's my point. Yes, you want to make a great first impression. You only get one chance at a first impression. But actually, Mikel Arteta has been given plenty of time and resources, let's be fair, because it's the strongest squad in the Premier League. Let's just give Thomas Frank a little bit of time as well.
Yeah, and I think that we should do that. But I'm saying I think he needs to realise his audience. He's got to make sure that he gets the feeling around the club right, because otherwise, Crook will tell you. I mean, he is the Saltmeister. The Tottenham fans are after him every 5 minutes because of his constant barracking of Ange Postecoglou. And even yesterday on Twitter, they were coming for him again, weren't they? Saying that you had an axe to grind. And the fact is that, they're just unhappy. They're cross. And I think getting them on side is really important, Crook.
I think
Not for you, obviously, for Thomas Frank.
They overestimate their club's place in the food chain that I would care.
Oh, that's out of order. That's out of order.
No, it's
and
true.
Now you're just fueling it.
It's true. Which is why I got called salty in the first place. In my lifetime, Tottenham have not really made a blot on the football landscape. Do you know, I'm still annoyed that Manchester United found a way to lose to them in Bilbao. And that was my overarching feeling coming away from yesterday, because they're not very good, Spurs. And Thomas Frank, as good a manager as he is, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of signings and a lot of investment to turn this ship around. They need a centre forward. I still think they're a little bit short defensively. I'm not sure Romero is having a great season. Our own Stuart Pearce was pretty critical of him during that Manchester United game. So there's a lot wrong with Tottenham, but his system was to blame yesterday for just how easy Arsenal found it to cut through them.
Yeah, I'm sure you said ship. That's it for the North London derby.